Sergeant Stephen Thompson tasted grit and cordite with every ragged breath. The smoke-choked sky of Xylos, a bruised purple overhead. Laser fire stitched glowing scars across the broken cityscape, each searing blast a counterpoint to the relentless Iridian artillery pounding the Terran lines further back. His squad was gone ghosts, devoured by the meat grinder, and now survival was a solitary, brutal equation of bullets, cover, and the rapidly fading light. Seeking refuge from the ongoing barrage, Stephen moved tactically, his boots crunching over shattered plasteel and glass, into the precarious shelter of a heavily damaged, multi-story civilian administration building. Its facade was a gaping wound, the interior exposed and debris-strewn, floors canted at dangerous angles. Amidst the cacophony of battle, the shriek of incoming rounds, the roar of collapsing structures, the distant rhythmic thud of the Iridian guns, a faint, high-pitched whimper, distinctly non-mechanical and desperate, cut through the noise. It caught his attention, drawing his gaze toward a damaged section of the building where a concrete support beam had weakened. Stephen advanced carefully, tool ready, his senses straining against the dust and noise. He rounded a pile of fallen ductwork and stopped, partially buried under a shower of plaster and twisted metal conduits. A small, alien child lay trembling. Vesta. Her form was slight, limbs thin, and one arm was clearly injured, dark fluid seeping into the pale grey dust. She was visibly wounded, her entire body shaking with a terror so profound it was almost a physical force in the ruined space, which might once have been an office or a public waiting area. Her Iridian features were unmistakable. Large, dark, expressive eyes that were wide and fixed on him with raw fear, skin that held a subtle pearlescent sheen even under layers of grime, and atop her head, a delicate crest of feathery filaments, now fluttering rapidly, a frantic semaphore of distress. Yet her small stature, the raw evidence of her injuries, the terrified, almost silent sobs that shook her frame, these registered with an undeniable, universal clarity. His breath hitched. Iridian, the word, the training, the years of loss and fury screamed in his skull. But the sound that had drawn him here, the terror in those wide, dark eyes that wasn't a soldier, that was a child. Stephen's gaze, practiced and swift, took in her visible injuries, a bleeding laceration on her upper limb, oozing a deep blue ichor, the fine tremor that spoke of shock, the way she coughed, a dry, rasping sound from the thick dust. She was so small, so utterly vulnerable. If he left her, she wouldn't last an hour. A sudden, violent explosion rocked the street outside, much closer this time. The ruined building groaned around them, tremors shaking dust from the ceiling and sending a fresh cascade of small debris clattering down. The immediate, ongoing danger pressed in, a physical weight demanding a decision. Now, a surge, hot and fierce, flooded through him, washing away the ingrained caution, the soldier's calculus of risk. It was something older, deeper. Stephen moved. He tore a strip from the already tattered sleeve of his fatigues, the fabric rough against his fingers. Crouching low, he gently, quickly, applied makeshift pressure to the bleeding limb, his other hand instinctively moving to shield her small head as more dust and fragments rained down. Then the choice, absolute and irrevocable, settled in his chest, heavy as stone, yet strangely liberating. He carefully worked his hands beneath her, dislodging her from the rubble that pinned one leg. With a grunt, he lifted the trembling alien child into his arms. She was lighter than he expected, fragile as spun glass. Her terrified whimper was a tiny, broken thing against his chest. Stephen's expression moments before a mask of battlefield weariness hardened with a new, raw dedication. He would protect her. Stephen, carrying Vesta, moved cautiously through the ruined building, prioritizing finding a less exposed exit point away from immediate artillery strikes, his senses on high alert for enemy patrols. Each step crunched on shattered plasteel and pulverized concrete, the dust stinging his nostrils. The building groaned under the relentless barrage, a symphony of impending collapse. He discovered a partially collapsed stairwell, leading down to a sub-level maintenance tunnel, a less direct route but offering greater concealment from aerial observation and potential ground patrol. Twisted metal rebar jutted out like skeletal fingers, and chunks of the ceiling threatened to fall with every tremor. "Easy does it," he muttered, more to himself than Vesta, testing each step before committing his weight. Navigating the dark, debris-filled tunnel proved difficult, the confined space hindering Stephen's movement and causing him to stumble, further straining his injured leg and jostling Vesta. The air hung thick with the smell of ozone and decay. Water trickled down the walls, slicking the already treacherous floor. His knee throbbed with each step, a dull, persistent ache that threatened to overwhelm him. Stephen located a small, relatively secure alcove within the tunnel, a former maintenance access point, and improvised a temporary shelter, clearing away debris and using salvaged materials to create a more defensible position. He kicked aside chunks of broken machinery and reinforced the entrance with a fallen panel, creating a makeshift barricade. The alcove offered a small respite from the oppressive darkness, a pocket of relative safety amidst the chaos. After securing the immediate area, Stephen conducted a more thorough assessment of Vesta's injuries, cleaning the laceration with salvaged water and bandaging it with torn pieces of his uniform, his touch gentle despite his gruff exterior. The water, lukewarm and metallic tasting, did little to cleanse the wound, but it was all he had. He ripped a strip from the hem of his already tattered uniform, carefully padding the gash on her arm. Stephen shared a portion of his limited rations, a nutrient bar, with Vesta, demonstrating how to consume it slowly and cautiously, while rationing his own intake, acutely aware of their dwindling supplies. The bar, a dense brick of processed protein and carbohydrates, tasted like ash in his mouth, but it was sustenance. He broke off a small piece and held it out to Vesta, gesturing for her to chew slowly. Vesta, initially hesitant, cautiously accepted the ration, mirroring Stephen's movements as she ate, her large eyes fixed on him, a flicker of trust beginning to displace her fear. She nibbled at the bar, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her gaze never left his, a silent question hanging in the air. During a brief lull in the artillery fire, Stephen ventured out of the tunnel to scavenge for additional supplies, emphasizing to Vesta, through gestures and a calm tone, to remain hidden and silent. He pointed to the deepest part of the alcove, then held a finger to his lips, his eyes conveying the gravity of the situation. "Stay," he mouthed, hoping she understood. While searching the surrounding ruins, Stephen discovered a partially intact Iridian medical kit containing basic wound dressings and a water purification device, a valuable find despite its origin. The kit, a sleek silver container, felt cool to the touch. Inside, vials of antiseptic and rolls of sterile bandages lay neatly organized. The water purifier, a small handheld device, hummed faintly when activated. Upon returning to the tunnel, Stephen purifies a small amount of water using the salvaged device and offers it to Vesta, who drinks gratefully, her crest momentarily displaying a calmer color. The purified water tasted clean and refreshing, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of the salvaged supply. As Vesta drank, the feathery filaments on her head pulsed with a soft blue light. A low, guttural vocalization echoes through the tunnel network, distinctly Iridian in origin, indicating the presence of a nearby patrol, forcing Stephen and Vesta to immediately take cover deeper within the alcove. The sound, a series of clicks and hisses, sent a shiver down his spine. He grabbed Vesta's hand, pulling her further into the shadows. Stephen positions himself defensively in front of Vesta, his weapon drawn, listening intently to the approaching sounds, his senses straining to determine the patrol's size and direction. A heavy sense of unease filled him now. He gripped his weapon, his finger near it. The Iridian patrol passes close by their hiding place, their voices audible but unintelligible, their footsteps echoing ominously through the tunnel, creating a moment of intense tension and near discovery. The guttural voices, distorted by the tunnel's acoustics, seemed to surround them. Each footstep resonated in his chest, a drumbeat of impending doom. After the patrol moves past, Stephen notices a small, metallic object lying near the tunnel entrance, a tracking device, emitting a faint, high-frequency pulse, confirming they are being actively hunted. The device, no bigger than his thumb, pulsed with a faint red light. He recognized the telltale whine of its frequency, a signal meant to be picked up by Iridian scanners. Stephen disables the tracking device using his combat knife, recognizing the need to change their route and employ more sophisticated evasion tactics to avoid further detection. He jammed the blade into the device, severing its power source. The pulsing light flickered and died, leaving only the faint scent of burnt circuitry. As they prepare to move, Vesta reaches out and touches Stephen's hand, her crest glowing with a faint blue light, an apparent expression of gratitude or reassurance, deepening their non-verbal communication. Her small hand, surprisingly warm, rested lightly on his. The blue glow from her crest pulsed softly, illuminating her wide, dark eyes. Stephen, despite his weariness and the escalating danger, offers Vesta a small, reassuring smile, his commitment hardening to protect her, transforming his initial instinct into a personal mission. The corner of his mouth quirked upwards, a fleeting expression of warmth. He squeezed her hand gently. "Let's get out of here, kid," he whispered. Stephen, aware the Iridians were actively tracking them, veered sharply to the east, away from what remained of the main thoroughfare. Each step crunched on pulverized ferrocrete and twisted metal, the skeletal remains of buildings clawing at the bruised sky. This section of the city was even more treacherous, a labyrinth of collapsed walls and dangling rebar, slowing their progress to a crawl. A misstep here could mean a broken ankle or worse. They reached a collapsed building, its entrance blocked by a mountain of debris, no way around it. Stephen gritted his teeth, the pain in his leg a constant throb. He began hauling chunks of plasteel and broken furniture, creating a makeshift ramp. Each lift sent shards of agony through his shoulder, but he couldn't stop. Vesta watched, her large eyes wide with a fear he knew mirrored his own. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ramp was traversable. He tested it gingerly, then nodded to Vesta. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice rough. Further on, nestled within the skeletal remains of what must have been a supply depot, Stephen spotted a shattered storage container. Inside, miraculously intact, were several packets of preserved nutrient paste, enough to sustain them for a few more days. Relief washed over him, quickly followed by the realization of the added weight. He stuffed as many packets as he dared into his already overloaded pack. Vesta, seeing his struggle, reached for one of the smaller packets. Her tiny hands strained to lift it. It couldn't have weighed more than a few ounces. But the gesture was everything. He let her take it, adjusting his grip to ensure she wouldn't drop it. After another hour of grueling progress, Stephen found a relatively sheltered alcove for a brief rest. As he sat, leaning against a crumbling wall, he noticed Vesta shivering. The air was still thick with the residual heat of recent explosions, but she was trembling violently. Illness? Shock? Gods, he didn't know. He scanned the ruins, desperate for a better shelter. Then he saw it, a partially intact HAB unit, buried beneath a mountain of rubble. It was risky. An enclosed space meant limited escape routes, but it offered better protection from the element. He made the call. The entrance was a narrow crawl space. Inside, the HAB unit was surprisingly intact, a small, self-contained living space. Dust motes danced in the faint light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. And then he saw it, a functional heating unit, powered by a small, humming energy cell. A wave of warmth washed over him as he activated it. Relief, profound and immediate, but the energy signature, it would be detectable. He turned to Vesta, pulling salvaged blankets from a storage compartment. She was still shivering. As he wrapped her in the makeshift cocoon, she reached out, her small hand gently touching his wounded leg. Her crest, the feathery frill on her head, emitted a soft, calming blue light. He froze, surprised. The pain in his leg, it was lessening, not gone but muted, dulled. He watched her, his mind racing. Empathic healing, was that even possible? He allowed her to continue, focusing on the strange, soothing sensation. A sudden tremor shook the HAB unit, sending dust raining from the ceiling. The humming of the heating unit seemed to amplify the silence that followed. Then, the distinct sound of Iridian voices, drawing closer. They'd been tracked. Stephen cursed under his breath. He quickly extinguished the heating unit, plunging the HAB unit into near darkness. He drew his sidearm, a pulse pistol, and positioned himself defensively near the entrance, his heart pounding against his ribs. The Iridian patrol burst into the HAB unit, their night vision equipment casting an eerie green glow across the interior. They saw him, saw Vesta huddled behind him. There was no time for words. He fired. 2 Iridian soldiers dropped instantly, their bodies twitching on the floor. But a bolt of energy seared across his arm, a searing pain that numbed his fingers. He staggered back, his aim faltering. Vesta, startled by the gunfire, emitted a high-pitched, keening sound, a sound that resonated deep within his skull. He saw the remaining Iridian soldiers clutch their heads, momentarily disoriented. It was the opening he needed. He pressed the button, sending 2 more blasts of energy at the Iridians. They slumped to the ground. Silence. He was breathing hard, the sharp smell of ozone filling the air. The HAB unit was secure, for now, but their location was compromised. As they left the HAB unit, Stephen spotted a distant flashing light, a Terran Federation search beacon. Hope surged through him, a fierce, desperate wave. Rescue. But the beacon was across an open, heavily bombarded area. Reaching the beacon meant risking everything. Exposure, certain detection. But Vesta, she needed medical attention. He had to try. The prospect of reaching human lines, of getting her safe, fueled his purpose. They started across the open area, moving low and fast, the ground trembling beneath their feet. Explosions rocked the landscape around them, sending plumes of dust and debris into the air. And then he saw them. A patrol of human soldiers, clad in Terran Federation armor, emerged from the ruins. They raised their weapons, their faces grim. "Halt!" one of them barked, his voice amplified by his helmet's comm system. "Identify yourselves and explain the presence of that thing." The patrol leader, a hardened sergeant with a face etched with years of war, stared at Vesta, his eyes narrowed. "Are you compromised, soldier? What's your intention with that Iridian child?" Stephen knew in that instant that he faced a choice as dangerous as any battlefield. The Terran sergeant, a man whose face was more scar tissue than skin, barked, "Marine, I said disarm. That thing is an enemy combatant until proven otherwise. Drop your weapon and put the alien down. Now." The sergeant's blaster was leveled, unwavering. Stephen's grip tightened on his own weapon, but not to raise it. He held it low, a clear sign of non-aggression, but he didn't relinquish it. Vesta whimpered, pressing closer against him, her small body trembling. The air crackled with tension, thicker even than the cordite smoke. "She's wounded, Sergeant, and she's a child. Look at her. She needs a medic, not an execution." "I'm ordering you, Thompson. That's a direct order." The sergeant's voice rose, but before Stephen could respond, a new voice cut through the air, sharp and commanding. "Sergeant Miller, stand down." A taller figure strode forward, her face obscured by the helmet of her powered armor, but her voice carried the unmistakable authority of command. "What's the situation here?" Miller snapped to attention. "Captain Rostova, this Marine was found harboring an Iridian child. I was ordering him to disarm and surrender the alien." Rostova approached, her gaze sweeping over Stephen, then settling on Vesta. "Sergeant Thompson, is it? Explain yourself." Stephen met her gaze, his own unwavering. "Captain, I found her in the rubble. She's wounded, scared, and clearly not a threat. I'm requesting medical attention for her." Rostova considered him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Very well. Sergeant Miller, escort them to Outpost Gamma. Sergeant Thompson, you will cooperate fully. I want answers, and I want them now." The journey to Outpost Gamma was tense. Miller and two other soldiers flanked Stephen and Vesta, their weapons trained on them. The outpost was a sprawling complex of prefabricated structures and hastily erected barricades, a hive of activity buzzing with weary soldiers and the constant thrum of generators. Inside the medical bay, a Terran medic, a woman with tired eyes and a gentle touch, began examining Vesta. Her crest drooped, the feathery filaments dull. Stephen watched anxiously as the medic scanned Vesta with a handheld device. "Her physiology is unusual," the medic said, her brow furrowed, "and I'm picking up a faint energy signature emanating from her crest. I've never seen anything like it." As the medic continued her examination, Vesta began to stir, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around, disoriented and frightened. Suddenly, she cried out, a sharp, piercing sound that seemed to vibrate through the room. The lights flickered, and the monitors displaying vital signs went haywire. Outside, the outpost's communication system sputtered and died. Rostova stormed into the medical bay, her face grim. "What the hell was that?" I don't know, Captain," the medic stammered. Her vitals spiked, and then everything went haywire. Rostova turned her attention to Stephen. Her eyes narrowed. "You, with me?" Now. In a small, sterile interrogation room, Rostova sat across from Stephen, her gaze intense. "Let's cut the crap, Sergeant. What is that thing? And what do you know about it?" Stephen sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Captain, I told you. I found her in the rubble. I don't know what she is or what she can do. All I know is that she's a child who needs help. And you expect me to believe that? You risked your life, disobeyed orders, all for an Iridian. Why?" Stephen's voice hardened. "Because my squad, they're gone. Wiped out by an artillery barrage. I was the only survivor. I couldn't just leave her there to die." He paused, his gaze distant. Maybe I was trying to make up for something. Maybe I was trying to prove to myself that I wasn't completely dead inside." Rostova studied him, her expression softening slightly. "And you think saving an Iridian child is going to bring your squad back?" "No, Captain. But maybe it'll make the universe a little less dark." Rostova remained silent for a moment, then sighed. "All right, Thompson. For now, the alien. Vesta will be kept under observation in a secure medical bay. You will be confined to quarters, under guard. That's for her protection and yours." As Stephen was escorted to his assigned quarters, a small, cramped room with a cot and a single viewport, he overheard snippets of conversations between Rostova and her officers. DNA matches a high-ranking Iridian diplomat, known to be seeking a peaceful resolution. Energy signature is off the charts. Could be a weapon. Iridians are searching for her. Intense scans. Stephen sat on the cot, his mind racing. Vesta wasn't just a refugee. She was a key figure in something much larger. She was valuable, and that made her a target. He had to protect her, not just from the Iridians, but from his own side as well. Meanwhile, light years away, aboard an Iridian warship, a ruthless commander stared at a holographic display, his face a mask of cold tenacity. "The Terrans have her. Outpost Gamma, prepare for immediate assault. We will retrieve the envoy's child, despite the cost." Back at Base Gamma, Rostova stood on the command deck, her face set as she reviewed the sensor readings. "They're approaching," she said, her voice tight. "And they're not playing games. Fortify all positions. Prepare for a full-scale assault." She knew the outpost was strategically important, a key listening post. But now, with Vesta present, it was a prize worth dying for. Stephen, confined to his quarters, felt a growing sense of unease. He couldn't shake the feeling that Vesta was in danger. He had to get to her. He rose from the cot, his eyes narrowed, and began to examine the door, searching for a way out. A few minutes later, after disassembling a light fixture and using a sharpened piece of metal as a makeshift lockpick, Stephen slipped out of his confinement. He moved silently through the corridors, avoiding patrols, his senses on high alert. He reached the medical bay, the door sealed and guarded by 2 soldiers. He pressed himself against the wall, listening intently. He could hear Vesta's faint whimpers from inside. He had to get to her. He burst through the door, catching the guards by surprise. Before they could react, he disarmed them, his movements swift and efficient. Inside, Vesta lay on a medical bed, her eyes wide with fear. "It's okay, little one," Stephen said softly, his voice reassuring. "I'm here. We're getting out of here." He lifted her into his arms, and as they turned to leave, the outpost erupted in chaos. Explosions rocked the facility, and the air filled with the deafening roar of gunfire. The Iridian assault had begun. Stephen, carrying Vesta, navigated through the collapsing corridors, dodging debris and blaster fire. He used his combat skills to evade the Iridian soldiers, his every move calculated, his only goal to protect Vesta. Rostova, witnessing Stephen's unwavering dedication, felt a flicker of doubt. Was she wrong about the Iridians? Was there more to this than just a military objective? Stephen reached the perimeter of the outpost, finding a damaged escape shuttle, its hull riddled with holes. It was their only chance. "Stay here," he told Vesta, gently placing her behind a stack of crates. "I'll fix it." As he worked frantically on the shuttle's damaged engine, blaster fire whizzed past his head. He needed more time. Suddenly, Vesta's crest began to glow, a bright, pulsating light that seemed to fill the air. The attacking Iridian soldiers hesitated, their movements faltering, their expressions confused. It was a small window, but it was enough. Stephen slammed the final panel into place, and the engine sputtered to life. The escape shuttle shuddered violently as Stephen wrestled with the damaged controls, sparks flying from the console. Laser fire still laced the sky above the besieged Terran outpost, but the small craft, patched together with scavenged parts and sheer desperation, was finally airborne. Vesta whimpered beside him, clutching his arm. He spared a glance, seeing the fear still etched on her small alien face. Hours later, the immediate threat of the battle receding behind them, Stephen worked to stabilize the shuttle's erratic system. The hum of the engines was a fragile counterpoint to the silence that had fallen between them. He gently cleaned Vesta's wounds with a disinfectant wipe salvaged from the medkit, his touch careful and deliberate. "Almost there, little one," he murmured, his voice rough. "Almost safe." He looked out at the star-dusted blackness, the distant constellations indifferent to the carnage they had left behind. What was the point of it all? The endless struggle, the wasted wreckage. He'd been a soldier so long, led by duty and survival, but now, holding this small, fragile child in his arms, he wondered about everything. What was his purpose now? Was it just to survive, or was it something more? A sharp alarm blared through the shuttle. A Terran cruiser, its hull scarred by battle, appeared on the comm screen. Captain Rostova's face, etched with weariness but alive, filled the display. "Shuttle identified. This is Captain Rostova of the Dauntless. Sergeant Thompson, you are ordered to prepare to be boarded." Her voice was firm, but Stephen detected a subtle shift, a weariness that mirrored his own. On board the Dauntless, Rostova met them with a guarded expression. "Sergeant," she began, her gaze sweeping over Vesta, "I have orders regarding the Iridian child." She paused, then continued, her voice softening slightly. "It appears the Iridian diplomat to whom she is related has contacted the Terran Federation. They have expressed interest in initiating peace talks, contingent on the child's safety and well-being." Stephen's lips pursed. "Peace talks? After all this?" Distrust warred with a flicker of hope. Rostova nodded, her gaze meeting his. "It seems your actions, Sergeant, have complicated matters, and perhaps offered an opportunity. I have been instrumental in arranging this meeting. I believe this child, this innocent, could be the key to ending this war." Vesta, sensing the tension, reached out and gently touched Rostova's hand. The captain flinched at first, then stilled, her eyes widening slightly. A faint, almost imperceptible shift in her expression. She understands," Rostova murmured, her voice barely audible. She feels our intentions. Stephen, initially wary, saw the genuine hope in Rostova's eyes. He looked at Vesta, her large black eyes filled with an ancient wisdom he couldn't comprehend. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "I'll cooperate, but I remain Vesta's guardian throughout this whole process." A secure location was chosen, a neutral space station orbiting a distant, uninhabited planet. Representatives from the Terran Federation and the Iridian Empire gathered, their faces grim, their intentions uncertain. Vesta, small and seemingly fragile, stood between them, a symbolic bridge between two warring species. During the negotiations, tensions ran high. Accusations were hurled, old wounds were reopened. But whenever the conflict threatened to escalate, Vesta's presence had a calming effect. Her soft whimpers, her gentle gestures, her very existence served as a constant reminder of the human cost of war. Stephen stood beside her, his hand resting protectively on her shoulder, a silent testament to his unwavering commitment. At a crucial moment, when the negotiations seemed on the verge of collapse, Vesta reached out and touched the hand of the lead Iridian negotiator. A subtle empathic wave washed over the room, a shared feeling of loss, of weariness, of a desperate desire for peace. The negotiator's face softened, his voice losing its harsh edge. He spoke of shared values, of the importance of protecting future generations. A tentative ceasefire agreement was reached, a fragile first step towards a lasting peace. It was a direct result of Stephen's initial act of compassion, a single act that had rippled outwards, changing the course of the war. Stephen was offered a prestigious position as a liaison between the Terran Federation and the Iridian Empire, a chance to shape the future of the galaxy. He declined. "My place is with Vesta," he said simply. "She needs me." Rostova approached him later, her expression filled with gratitude. "You have shown us all what it truly means to be human, Sergeant Thompson. Your courage, your compassion, you have changed everything. You have given us hope." Stephen and Vesta were given a new home, a small farm on a neutral planet, a world dedicated to peace and cooperation. It was a place where they could live safely, far from the ravages of war, a place where Vesta could grow and thrive. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. Stephen stood beside Vesta, his arm around her small shoulders, as they looked out over their new home. The wind whispered through the fields, carrying the scent of wildflowers. "What do you think?" Stephen asked, his voice soft. Vesta looked up at him, her black eyes shining with a newfound peace. She reached out and took his hand, her small fingers intertwining with his. "Home," she whispered, the word a soft breath on the wind. The sun set, casting long shadows across the land, a symbol of hope and the enduring power of human compassion in a war-torn galaxy.